So starting chapter 9, as I just said, we're going to cover sections 9.2 and 9.3. Now, if we remember our data types going all the way back, we had our primitive data types, and that was the int, that was 1, double was 1, char was 1, and the last one was Boolean. And again, these were called our primitive data types. We can just grab them and use them. They go right to a memory location, and that's where the value is stored. So if I say int x25, it goes right to a spot, and that 25 is there. Okay. So today we're going to work a little bit more on this data type char, because a lot of what we do isn't working with chars, but blocks of code have already been written to help us work with characters. Okay, so we can do a whole lot more with characters by going to where all these blocks of code are written. And all these blocks of code, as you're now familiar with, are called methods. So I'm going to be calling methods that are stored somewhere. Now, where do I store them all? I'm storing them all in something called the character class. They're already written for us. When we start chapter 6, we're going to be writing our own class, which means somewhere we're going to be storing a whole bunch of methods that we can use. And we've seen that so far in a similar setting here. The character class is going to be a lot like the math class was, where if you remember back, I would call the class and say, hey, math dot, and I want to use pal. Hey, math dot, and I would use something else out of that math class. Well, the character class is going to be the same way. I'm going to go say, hey, character class, I want to use this method. So a lot of what's written in the character class is going to let us do testing. And you're going to see in a couple seconds, we're going to talk about testing as in the return type is going to be Boolean. We're going to look at doing some converting of characters. In fact, if you wanted to, you could go and Google Java character class and see all of the different methods that would in fact be available for you to use. These aren't hidden. You know, you could do Java math class and go look at all the methods of math methods that are already written for you. The first group of characters that I want to talk about are all ones that have a return type of Boolean. So in the methods we just wrote, these guys are written somewhere, and they're written as public static Boolean, followed by the method name. And here's several of them: is digit, is letter, is lowercase, is white space. And then there's going to be an argument. There'll be a parenthesis where a character has to be passed in, and that's the only thing in my parameter list. So this is starting to mirror what we just did a bunch of work with in chapter 5. I have a return type of Boolean. So I'm going to be looking at, you know, if I was actually writing this method, which is already written, as I said, public static Boolean. The method name is digit, and then I would have a parameter coming in, char ch. Okay, so that would be my method heading. Now, we don't ever have to write those. They're already done for us, but we understand what was written. Okay, so I have these methods, and I'm going to pass a character in. If it's a digit, what's a digit, by the way?
The number. Value.
Number, okay. Is a letter. We know what a letter is, A to Z. I'm sure it includes capital A to capital Z. And in the world of characters, I bet we're going to be using the, what's that called? In the world of characters, we're going to be using the A, S.
ASCII.
The ASCII code, right? And you all memorized that for the first test, unless you cheated and had it sitting taped to the wall behind the computer and you looked up and saw that it was the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. But nobody in this class would do something like that, right?
Nope.
No. Good. I had at least one no.
Wouldn't
Okay.
do me any good anyway.
So code listings. I had you type in two of them, code listing 9.1 and 9.2. And just some things to mention out of code listing 9.1. We were taking that character and we were saying if character dot, because I have to use, like I did with the math class. Remember in the math class, I said math dot whatever, whatever. Well, in 9.1, I'm using the character class. Character dot is letter, and I'm passing a parameter in. Here's my argument, CH, and it's being sent over to wherever that class is that has it. Okay? And there was an example of is digit, is lowercase, is uppercase, etc. Code listing 9.2. We had a public static Boolean. So now I'm writing a method like I just learned how to do in chapter 5. I want to see if this gigantic string is valid. And this is actually a good program, the one that's in code listing 9.2. Okay. I'm coming in and I start checking the length and doing some stuff like that. 9.2 is going to be a big help for assignment 9.1. And hopefully at this point, you are now going to print out assignment 9.1. So one of the things I recommend you do is as soon as it's available, print it out and read it. And as we're going through the material, you start saying, oh, char at I. Yeah, char at I. It's letting me go through a string one character at a time. And I'm in here checking to see if it's a letter and so on. So I have an array called customer number dot char at I. Okay. And I'm passing that as my argument into the character method called isLetter. And it's a way for me to go through and check to see if, certain things are happening inside of it. Okay. For example, one of the programs we're going to write shortly is you're going to go through a character at a time. And if it is a letter, you're going to change it from an upper to a lower or a lower to an upper. Another set of methods, remember in the beginning, I said we have methods to do testing and methods to do converting. Well, a couple of other methods that you may have seen would be the to lowercase, where I'm actually going to take a character as an argument, and my return type is going to be the character that if this was an uppercase, I'm going to return it as a lowercase. Okay. Once again, I also mentioned we need to use the class name before the method. Code listing 9.3 was a run again program, and it had something to do with a circle real quick. But you notice how when I asked them to enter a Y or an O, instead of checking to see if it's a capital Y and or if it's a lowercase y, I'm just going to take that character, which was choice, which looking back here, system dot, do you want to run this program again? I'm going to input a string. My choice is going to be take that string and do char at 0. So now whatever is entered, a Y or an N or whatever, I'm going to take that. And when I do, I'm going to go while character dot to uppercase of choice. So that way I don't have to compare it to the capital Y or the lowercase y. Or if they entered yeah or yes or yeppers or yeah man or whatever they may have entered, I can get the first character by using char at from the string input and store it in the character choice. Okay, any questions? So far, so good? So it's kind of a short lesson today because what I'm going to have you do is get back into coding, and what you're going to do now is going to prove extremely valuable to what you're going to do on assignment 9.1. So make sure you get that today and start taking a look at it. All right, so I'm going to have your groups write 2 programs. The first one is going to read in a word. You're going to read in a word. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, where B, D, and F are capitalized, A, C, E, and G are lowercase. I'm going to read in a string. Inside of here, I want to change all the lowercase to uppers and all of the uppers to lowers. So I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'm going to start typing right away. Oh, no. We know we don't like doing that. We're going to be algorithmically thinking about this. I'm going to input a string. So my string is going to be this guy. It's going to be the A, B, C, D, E, F, G string. And now I need to take a look at each one of these and replace it with something else. So somebody give me one idea of a way to replace one with something else. So right now, string 1 equals A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And how am I going to handle this? Because I want my out string to equal A, capital A, lowercase b, capital C, lowercase d, capital E, lowercase f, capital G. So somehow I have to get from, oh, well, these are two different strings, aren't they? Well, what if I went through this one at a time? How would I do that? What might become important here?
You can use a for loop.
I can use a for loop, okay? And I'll go from 0 to, how long is this string?
6.
Okay, if I covered it up and you couldn't see it, how long is it? How would I find out how long STR is?
The number of letters minus 1.
Okay, how do I find the number of letters? We're getting there. There's a method already. Length, yeah. There's a method called length that's written that I could find out how long STR is. Then I would go through a loop from 0 to that length minus 1. And then finally, what's the good method that I would use? Well, up here I already have the hint, use char at kind of deal. That's going to help me. So the first program I want you to do, read in a word at a time, go through a character at a time, change lower to upper, and vice versa. Second program I want you to do, read in a string, a nice long string, and return the number of words. How do you find out how many words there are? Again, we're going to be using char at to go through one at a time, and we're going to see how many. Now let's see. This space is space, a space test. How many words are there?
4. So you
4.
use white space?
Yeah, maybe white space. I would look up exactly what the definition of white space is. Otherwise, I would say I want to compare this to, quote, space, quote. And in the old days, lowercase b with a slash through it, that was my COBOL days. That stood for the character space. So single quote, space, single quote. This, if I put it in double quotes and a b with a slash through it, that was space inside of a string. Remember, this is a character, this is a string. If I'm using char at, I want to compare it to that. Okay, so let's get that out of there so we don't get all confused. But I can go that way. I could check the definition of what white space is. I might want to check the definition of, can I check to see if it is a space? If that's one of the methods, I'd have to maybe look on Google to find that.